Okay, great. So thank you for that introduction. So basically, I am here today to discuss, as Ashley said, how to protect your databases using Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So a super quick introduction about myself. I am a program manager on the Microsoft Defender for Cloud team as part of customer experience engineering. And I'm joined here today with Tomer Rotstein, who is a software engineering manager on the team that creates Microsoft Defender for SQL. And we also have Chaim Bendenin, and he is focused on Microsoft Defender for Azure CosmosDB, and he is the tech lead for that. So let's get to it. So I guess, first of all, let's talk about what we're going to go over in this presentation. The very first thing is that you'll discover why you should secure your data, and then you'll learn about how to actually deploy the database Defender plans that we have as part of Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And you'll also understand their benefits. And then we will have a deep dive into Defender for CosmosDB because it has just been released. And last but not least, we will have some demos actually scattered throughout the presentation. So first of all, let's talk about some of the data security challenges that we have. So here we have some global campaigns that have recently occurred that have targeted SQL workloads, and these were discovered by security vendors, but also by partners. And the one thing that all of these campaigns have in common is this same pattern. So they scan SQL Server endpoints, which are actually publicly accessible via the default SQL port, which is actually 1433. And then the attackers actually try to find weak users using that. And when they find one of these users, they then tried to brute force attack them, and they were actually successful, of course. And then after this, they were able to run crypto miners, such as using the XP command shell. And these are some of the attacks that have occurred. But what's important is that no organization is immune to these attacks or data breaches. And according to this report that we have here, 70% of reported data breaches are from on-premises assets, and 86% of breaches were financially motivated, which will probably not surprise anyone. But what may be more surprising is that 30% of the attacks involved internal people. So while I'm a huge believer in trusting the people that you work with, when you see this kind of statistic, it makes you want to ensure that you have set up the correct security operations in place to make sure that these don't occur. So now let's talk about some of the challenges that people see around security. So following numerous customer meetings that we've had, and also actually from research and reports, we've identified these three main security challenges that customers face. First of all, visibility is a top priority for organizations, especially when it comes to security and compliance. Second of all, customers are challenged by the increase in the number and also the sophistication and complexity of the attacks. And of course, also then the actual costs of data breaches. So in 2021, the average cost of a data breach actually reached the staggering figure of $4.24 million. Finally, the last security challenge that I'll call out is that more and more organizations are adopting a multi-cloud strategy, which adds to that complexity because there is specific expertise and know-how that is required then for each cloud. So protecting data has actually never been so complicated. And this is exactly where Defender for Cloud comes in to help with all of this. So let's go over a quick intro of what Defender for Cloud actually is before we get into any of the database stuff. So basically, Microsoft Defender for Cloud is a solution for cloud security posture management, CSPM, and cloud workload protection, CWP, that protects your cloud and also your hybrid environments. So it does things such as it helps you to find any weak spots and vulnerabilities that are across your cloud configuration. It also helps to strengthen the overall security posture of your environment. It does that using things like Secure Score, for example. It can protect workloads across multi-cloud and also hybrid environments from any threats and evolving threats as well. And last but not least, it integrates with a range of products that actually enable this seamless response and automation for your SecOps teams. For example, it integrates with SIMs like Sentinel or Logic Apps, which Logic Apps actually help you to trigger automations to quickly react to threats. Okay. So now I want to give you an overview of the full stack coverage of the workloads that can be protected using Defender for Cloud. So if we start off with Azure, first of all, we have protections in Azure, such as protecting your compute workloads, app services, and Kubernetes. And we can also protect the Azure service layer, which we actually had a webinar focused on that last week on specifically Azure DNS and Azure Resource Manager. So maybe one of the moderators could maybe pop that in the chat window, the link to that YouTube video, if anyone is interested. And then, as well as that, you can also protect your storage accounts and your databases. Of course, we're going to go in detail on databases in this session. So that was basically the Azure. But it's very important that you know that it's not just Azure workloads that Defender for Cloud can help to protect. It can actually also help to protect your AWS and your GCP workloads, and that is done through our new super easy to deploy connectors. And as well as that, you also can protect your on-premises workloads using Azure Arc as well. Okay, so now that we've talked about the general benefits that are available through Defender for Cloud, let's go into how Defender for Cloud can protect your databases. So first of all, let's see what workloads Defender for Cloud can protect for your databases. So these are the database specific ones. So first of all, you can see there that we protect your managed SQL resources, the PaaS resources, so platform as a service. And you can see these are Azure SQL Database, and also, and not everyone knows about the others, but actually Defender for SQL can also protect your Azure SQL Managed Instance, your Azure SQL Elastic Pools, and your dedicated SQL pool in Azure Synapse Analytics as well, all part of the PaaS offering. Next up, Microsoft Defender for Cloud can actually protect your SQL IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service. And it does this through our Defender for SQL on Machines plan. And here, basically, we can protect your SQL servers that are hosted on a machine, such as an Azure virtual machine, an on-premises machine, an Azure Arc enabled SQL server. But also in this plan, you're also able as part of the IaaS plan, you're also able to protect your SQL servers that are hosted in AWS and GCP, specifically the AWS RDS custom, and also on AWS EC2 in AWS, of course. And then for GCP, your SQL servers on Google Compute Engine VMs through those connectors that we have. And actually, Tomer will show you a demo for that in just a few minutes. Okay, and then we also have an offering to help you protect your Defender for open source databases in Azure. So these are MariaDB, MySQL, and PostgreSQL. And last but definitely not least, also just out in GA is Defender for Azure CosmosDB. And actually, Chaim will talk all about this one later on. Okay, so now that we've talked about what you can protect in Defender for Cloud, what databases, now let's talk about how you can actually activate these Defender database plans. So I'm going to talk about them first, and then Tomer will show you the demo. First up, I'm going to talk about how you can set up the database plans in Azure, first of all. So at subscription level, and this is actually the recommended way. So there's a few ways, but the recommended way is to enable all of the database Defender plans at subscription level. And you can do this using the UI in the Azure portal by going to Defender for Cloud and then going into the environment settings. And once you find your subscription, then you are able to find the databases, and you can select which types of databases you want to turn on, which type of databases you have in your environment that you want to protect. So that is the recommended way. The other way is that you also alternatively enable the plan at the Azure resource level. And what this means is that you can actually turn the plan on just for resources. So you can do this. One way to do this, there are several. One way to do this is from the UI. If you go to find the resource, and then you go to Microsoft Defender for Cloud under the settings, you can actually enable the plan just on that resource itself. And last but not least, you're actually also able to enable the database plans via REST APIs, PowerShell, Azure CLI, and we even have some ARM templates to help you out with the enabling. Okay, so now that we've talked about how to enable these in Azure, next up, let's talk about how you can enable, how you can bring in your non-Azure databases into Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So Defender for SQL also covers the multi-cloud SQL scenarios, and Azure Arc is actually what allows you to bring those non-Azure resources into Azure. So you are then able to control those non-Azure databases, non-Azure resources in Azure, in Microsoft Defender for Cloud, just as if they were any other Azure resource. And this gives you actually better manageability of your SQL workloads cross cloud. So now that we've talked about Azure Arc in general, let's talk about how you can use Azure Arc for your AWS and GCP databases. So basically, using the new GCP and AWS connectors, you can now also super easily protect your databases that are hosted in AWS and GCP, and you can see them listed there. You can actually protect these in Defender for Cloud. And the way that you do this is you, let's say you take one of these SQL Server on AWS EC2, and then you basically can directly protect it from the Microsoft Defender for Cloud dashboard. And very important is that you can also get vulnerability assessment, which actually allows you to see misconfigurations in your databases, and also advanced threat protection, which detects and actually alerts you about any threats that have occurred. You get these two capabilities even for your multi-cloud resources for AWS and GCP. And we'll talk about both of these capabilities in a lot more detail in a few minutes, but it's important to know you also get them in multi-cloud as well. And then last but not least, you are able to protect these AWS and GCP databases in Defender for Cloud, and you can use them as part of Secure Score as well. So specifically even Secure Score for AWS and GCP to help you to determine your security posture overall for those environments, including for the databases. And you can also have regulatory compliance standards as well for AWS and GCP. So now that I've talked about how you can actually, how to actually enable these plans, I'm going to now hand it over to Tomer, who is the software engineering manager for Defender for SQL, and he will actually give you the demo and also talk a lot about advanced threat protection for Defender for SQL as well. So Tomer, you can take it away there.
Thank you, Liana. So I'm going to show a lot of demos, and here's the agenda for the demos. So first of all, we are going to show how to enable at-scale Defender for SQL across cloud. We're going to show that in Azure. We're going to show that in AWS and GCP. We are going to show how to generate different alerts. We're going to show how it's easy for you to verify that Defender for SQL is protecting your database, and how to investigate the alerts inside the Defender for Cloud attach blade in the Azure portal. And then Liana is going to show you how to analyze vulnerability assessment finding. So let's go ahead and talk about how to enable the protection. So for this demo, I'm going to use several resources that I have. So here is my AWS account. And in my AWS, I have a resource called SQL Test 2. Also, I have a GCP account. And in this GCP account, I have, through the Google Compute Engine, I have also a virtual machine called Test SQL VM. Additionally, I have an on-prem machine. This is the laptop from which I'm presenting right now, which is called Tomer Lab. So this laptop is domain joined and it is not part of the cloud at all. It is an on-prem machine. So I would like to connect all those machines and protect them at scale from Defender for Cloud. So let's see how easy it is to do for all the different resources. So I have all those resources connected to Azure. Let's see how I did that. So first of all, let's talk about the Azure resources. So I have this resource called Tomer Test DB2. I can enter it and see a lot of information about that. It's a SQL Azure database, a PaaS resource, and I can enable the protection on it at the resource level. But more important, we provide a way for you to enable that on the subscription level. So how are you doing that? You go directly to Defender for Cloud settings and go to the Defender plans. Through the Defender plans, we now consolidated all the different plans for databases in a single section called databases. You can just turn it on. And if you want, you can drill down to the different types that we provide. The different plans are Azure SQL Database, as Liana mentioned, Single Database, Elastic Pool, SQL Managed Instance, and Synapse Analytics. We have the plan for SQL Server on machine. This protects your on-premise, your Azure Arc-enabled SQL Server anywhere. And we also have your open source relational database. This is MariaDB, MySQL, and PostgreSQL on Azure. And the new offering that Chaim will demonstrate later is the Azure CosmosDB. So I want to enable all of that. I'm going to approve that. And once this is saved, every new resources in my Azure subscription will be automatically enabled and protected. So as you can see, this is my SQL database protected. I also have my on-prem machine. For the on-prem machine that I showed earlier, Tomer Lab, powered by Azure Arc. This is connected to my corp domain. And this was manually installed. But for the resources in AWS, I can leverage the new experience that Microsoft provides through the connector page in Defender for Cloud. So through the same environment settings in Defender for Cloud, you can add environment and connect your AWS or GCP accounts to Azure. So I already done that. And let's look how the process is done. Basically, all you need to do is provide the account details, mainly your AWS account, decide to which subscription, resource group, and location you want to connect that to. Next, you need to select the plans that you want to enable. You can see that we have a new databases plan here, protecting your EC2 machines, RDS custom, powered by Azure Arc. And you can drill down for the configuration to see what happens when you turn that on. What happened is that we will auto-provision your resource in order to supply the protection. We are going to install Azure Arc Agent that will give you the resource that represent the AWS or GCP resource in Azure. We are going to install additional log analytics extension, which powers the protection logic, which is the SQL Server on machine that runs on top of the log analytics agent as a solution. And we also give you the ability to automatically discover SQL Server and register that as a separate SQL Arc resource in Azure portal. So not only you can manage the SQL the VM itself, you can also manage the SQL. So I'm happy with that configuration. For the next step, I'm going to configure the access. In this step, we give you a CloudFormation template that you need to go to your AWS account and install it, by this, you give Microsoft Defender for Cloud the permission to provision automatically at scale your resources in AWS or GCP. Once you've done that, you click Review and Generate and Confirm. So with that, you can see that my resources are now inside Azure portal. You can see that I can verify that this resource is indeed in GCP by Google Compute Engine, and the other resource, which is AWS resource, is indeed provided by cloud provider AWS, and I have the representation. So now I'm all protected and connected. The next thing would be for us to go over through alerts and how they can be generated and investigated. So let's talk about what alerts we have. So we have three main categories for alert. The first one are alerts that analyze your queries. We have here SQL Injection family alert, potential and vulnerability. We have the query obfuscation, and we have the shell external source execution, which we'll demo in a bit. We also have the threat intelligence alerts, which enable you to get alert on access from unusual locations, suspicious IP, and unusual access from principal, data center, or domain. This is all powered by Microsoft Threat Intelligence streams. And last, we have the Brute Force family that contains the potential brute force. We have different flavors of that, and successful brute force as well. So let's start with demo, and for that, I'm going to show the SQL brute force on the AWS machine. So first of all, let's talk about briefly what is SQL brute force. One of the highly prevalent in IaaS and on-prem. In Azure, you are protected by the SQL gateway, but outside, this is immediately when you spin up a new SQL server, you get scanned and hit by brute force attempts. It can go undetected for a long time, in even weeks. And there are several attack flavors. It can be on a user, on a password. It can be spray attack. There are different ways of doing that from dictionaries. And once attacker gain access to the resource, it can do a lot of other malicious attacks. So to demo that, I'm going to go back to my AWS, and this is from the AWS console. I'm connected to the machine. I'm going to show you that this is running SQL Server on the machine. So I know this is a SQL Server resource. Also, health service is running, so it is protected by the Microsoft monitoring agent. So protection is running. And we are giving you, with the agent installed, we are giving you, we are installing basically a module called SQL Advanced Threat Protection Shell. This module gives you several commandlets that helps you validate the status of the protection, but more important, give you the ability to simulate alerts and test the actual value of the product. So let's start ahead and run the SQL ATP brute force. What this will do will simulate logins attempt to the database. As I don't know the password, all of those will fail. So I simulate 100 logins. And in a near real time, if we go to the Defender for Cloud, you would see that I get a suspected brute force attack attempt. I have a description on the alert. I also have the location. In this case, it was from the local IP. I have the SQL Server name. This is the AWS account. I also have a link to the resource where I can manage it further. I have the different information about, the account and IP, etc. And more important, I can take action. And we provide you with a set of mitigation that you can follow. For example, block using different methods, disable the SA account, or use strong password. So this is a very strong detection, and I urge you to utilize that. For the next demo, I'm going to talk about SQL injection, and for that we are going to use demo that on a SQL Azure database. So first of all, what is SQL injection? It's one of the most common attacks on SQL databases. Basically, in a nutshell, it utilizes a vulnerability in an application, but not in the SQL server. The application is backed by a SQL server, and when the application doesn't sanitize correctly the user input, which is used in a dynamic SQL statement, for example, constructing something that comes from several fields in a web form, attacker can take leverage of that and insert its own SQL code to run it, which was not intended by the application. For example, extract information from the database or even take ownership of the machine itself. So let's demo that as well. And for that, I'm going to hook up to a sample CRM application that is backed by a SQL database. So this application is very simple. I'm going to just, try and log in. So it failed because I didn't provide the correct user or password. Now I'm going to provide the correct password. And once I'm logged in, I can work with customer data. So I have several fields with information about the users. So let me log out and put the hat of an attacker. So I don't know the password. I know the user, but I don't know the password. But I can assume that those two fields are used in a dynamic SQL statement, and probably the application take the values from those fields and construct them to a statement that will validate them against an internal data. So I'm going to put this text inside, which basically will close the opening single quote, add an or condition with an always evaluate to true condition, and also add a comment in the end, not to run everything that comes afterwards. And with that, I'm logged in. So once I logged in, I can even do more stuff. For example, I can run this one for try to extract the version of the SQL database. This way I know what version is it, and I can take leverage of additional vulnerabilities that I know based on the version. So this actually failed and I got an exception, but because the application didn't handle the exception well, I get through the application, the convert to nvarchar exception, I get the actual value, and I know this is backed by a SQL Azure database. So with that, I can leverage additional attacks. And one more thing I can do for this demo, I can, through trial and error, I can really go through the sys columns and see what columns exist on this database. And then through trial and error, extract information from a column that wasn't even in the original web form. For example, in this case, the SQLite credit cards. And voila, running this, I get exception as well. But as before, through the exception, I can see that this name has a credit card number and I can use that credit number. So I did a lot of attacks. And if I go to the Defender for Cloud, I can see that I got a SQL injection alert. This is on the actual Tomescu test database, which backed the CRM application. I get information. I can see even the vulnerable statement that I ran and additional information as before. And similarly, I can take action to mitigate the alert. So this was SQL injection, and we would see another demo on that later on. For the next demo, we talk about shell external source execution, and for that I'm going to use the on-prem machine. So what is shell external source execution? Basically is using XP command shell to access resources on the internet, and with that download malware or other scripts. And this is very interesting because we actually saw that in the wild through campaigns. So consider an attacker doing a brute force like we saw before, successfully gaining access the password to the SQL server, and then execute an XP command shell such as this, where through the shell, he's concatenating some script to a temp file or to a file and run it, basically downloading some payload from the internet and running. And you can think about a crypto mining campaign, and you can think about Command and Conquer and other scenarios. So Defender for SQL analyze your queries and try to see if those kind of execution try to access internet location. If I go back to the Defender for Cloud portal, I see that I got an alert that SQL Server spawned a command shell and accessed abnormal source. You can see information about the alert. You can see the command that was ran. Don't worry, it wasn't a really malicious IP that was accessed, and you can see additional information that was that you have about this alert, and you can also take action to mitigate the alert. For the last demo, we are going to talk about query obfuscation. So consider the previous attack. If product like Defender for SQL can take a look on the commands, or if someone is looking on the auditing logs, you can see what happens. So if I'm an attacker, I would like to obfuscate that. So the goal of the query obfuscation attack is to change the query form, hiding its malicious part in order to bypass detection. So take a look at the following example. I have an XP command shell running a malicious script, like before. But the same command I can run in 3 different options. For example, I can run it by concatenating the characters, or I can concatenate the character, the ASCII value of them, or I can even convert that to a binary form and run it. The important thing about this attack is to understand that all those forms would execute the same, because SQL Server can parse them and execute them as the original statement. So let's demo that real quick. So this is my on-prem machine. This is running SQL Server as well. I have SQL Server installed on it. And also, this is powered by the Microsoft Health Agent, so I am protected. So again, as before, let's import the model that we give you with the agent, and let's run this as test SQL ATP shell obfuscation. So since it leverage a successful connection, I'm going to provide the username and the password to the SQL Server. And since it successfully logged into my local SQL Server, it successfully stimulates the shell obfuscation on Tomorrow app. So let's go back to the portal and see that I got an alert about unusual payload with obfuscated parts has been initiated by SQL Server. I get the information about the alert. I get the SQL Server name. You see it's Tomorrow app. I have the SQL instance name. What's important here to see that I can see both the original statement that the script ran and also the outcome that SQL Server runs. So in this case, the actual command that was run was dir, but this was the obfuscated form of it. I can also navigate to the affected resource, or I can take action through the mitigation steps that we see here. Or I can just, go ahead with the resource and, take action and take it out of the domain, or use firewall, the local firewall to protect it. So here we have different ways of query obfuscation that you have on the web. That those were just samples, and it's important to say that Defender for SQL protects against all of them. We have a unique capability of making sure that whatever obfuscation attackers are trying to make, we will catch that. With that, let me hand it back to Liana that will show you vulnerability assessment in Defender for SQL.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Tomer. That was a really brilliant demo about Azure Advanced Threat Protection. So how you can see all of these threats and how you can demo all of these threats, and then afterwards also how you can get the alerts for them as well. So that is one functionality that is available as part of Defender for SQL. But then the other functionality that we have that I'm now going to talk about, the other really awesome functionality is vulnerability assessment. So let's first understand what vulnerability assessment is. It's basically a capability that allows the discovery and remediation for security misconfigurations in your SQL servers. And I want to say that it is available for your Defender for SQL PaaS and Defender for SQL IaaS offerings. Okay, so how does it actually work? So it runs a set of security checks that identify if there are any security misconfigurations in your SQL assets. It then allows for setting something called a security baseline that lets you customize the results so that they match your environment, so that if there are any vulnerabilities or misconfigurations that you want to accept as part of your baseline, then these won't be shown next time that the scan happens. They won't be shown in the vulnerabilities recommendation. Okay, and last but not least, vulnerability assessment actually shows you a really super clear report that contains all the misconfigurations that is super helpful for security audits as well. And now I just want to show you a demo of how you can actually set this up. So I am now in Microsoft Defender for Cloud. I'm in recommendations. So if you here, I've just typed in the vulnerabilities just to see the kind of recommendations that are associated with this. Okay, so the one that I want to look at, or the ones that I want to look at first of all, are that SQL servers should have vulnerability assessment configured. So you actually need to enable the vulnerability assessment at the SQL server level, and then afterwards you'll be able to get the vulnerabilities, you'll be able to see what they are at the database level. And then we also have, for example, SQL managed instances should have vulnerability assessment configured. And if we actually go to select this one, we can see more information about it. So we can see the severity. It's important to have a vulnerability assessment that is included in all of your resources. So it's high. And then you can see the freshness interval and tactics and techniques and so on. So you can get more information, description, remediation steps. Here you can see that there's a manual remediation, but there's also a quick fix. So the quick fix is actually the easiest one to use. So if there are any unhealthy resources, in this case we have this one, then we recommend actually just selecting it and just simply clicking the quick fix, fix the resource, fix one resource there, and then that will actually just take just a few minutes. Okay, so that's how you can actually set up the vulnerability assessment on your SQL assets. But now let's have a look at what vulnerability assessment, what vulnerabilities actually look like. So let's look at this one. SQL databases should have vulnerability findings resolved. So here we can actually see which findings have been found on your databases. And I actually like to think of this recommendation as a mini dashboard within a dashboard, because we've got all of this, we've got the unhealthy resources, but then underneath we've also got more information. Here we have the actual findings that have been found for the databases. So for example, we have the finding of DBO users should not be used for normal service operation. And we can get some more information there. We have the actual query that was ran as part of the scan that actually triggered this misconfiguration to appear here. We can see the unhealthy databases. If we actually click on them, we can get more information as well. Now we're in the database page, and now if we select this, we can see again more information how to remediate this as well. So basically, this is some information about the vulnerabilities associated with your SQL assets, and you should try to remediate all of these. As much you should try to remediate all of them so that that actually improves your security posture. So with that, I am now going to hand it over to Haim, who is going to talk about specifically Microsoft Defender for Azure CosmosDB. So, Haim, I'm going to stop sharing and you can go for it.
Thank you, Liana. Hi, everyone. I'm Haim from the Defender for Azure CosmosDB team. We released the product to GA just last week, and it's a very exciting release for us. So we are happy to ship the security product to you. Now I'll give you a short overview of what Defender for CosmosDB is. We will go over our security recommendations and alerts, and we will have a short demo at the end. So before that, let's start with just a few words about CosmosDB. So CosmosDB is a very unique cloud-native database that promises you low latency and high availability, but it's not very clear at first sight what is the attack surface in terms of security. And this is what we address with Defender for CosmosDB. We provide a security layer that detects anomalous connections, potential identity leaks, data exfiltration, SQL injections, and more. And in order to do that, we focus on analyzing the traffic against your CosmosDB accounts. And we analyze not only your data plane transactions, but also your control plane operations. Defender for CosmosDB is available for the SQL API, and you can enable it at the resource or at the subscription level, just like Liana demonstrated earlier. Now, the way we think about the extra protection and the alerts that we provide is by understanding that the attackers can reach your data in a lot of different ways, and we want to alert you at different steps of the attack. The sooner the better, obviously. So you can think about it as having like a multi-layered approach, and that's a big message here. So let's take a look at the recommendations and the alerts that we have and how they can help you avoid vulnerabilities and detect and mitigate potential breaches. So we'll start with keys, because access keys in Cosmos give you access to basically everything. And once you have the keys, you have access to download all the data, you can update or change data, and do really anything you want. So let's say that the attacker managed to get an identity that has permission to list keys on your account. And by using that identity, he will get the CosmosDB key. So we will catch that anomaly in the control plane with two different alerts. The first one is when the attacker used known malicious script to list your keys. And the second alert is very new and will be released this week actually. And for that scenario, we'll alert you if the identity that grabbed the key is anomalous. In addition to these alerts, we strongly recommend you to access your account with RBAC instead of keys. And that's why we invested into creating a brand new recommendation that will also be released next week that will encourage you to start enforcing the usage of RBAC only. So let's move on, and let's say that the attacker got a key or that he has an identity that has access to your Cosmos account. And in that case, we will catch that in the data plane. So for example, we will alert you on anomalous connection from an unusual location or from a suspicious IP, which by the way is based on Microsoft Threat Intelligence data, which is a huge amount of data about IPs and their reputation. Another interesting scenario is when the attacker tries to breach your database by going through your applications that are hooked into your CosmosDB account. And here you will find the classical SQL injection alert and fuzzing alerts, just like Tomo demonstrated earlier. So for example, if you are an attacker run penetration testing tools like SQL Map or others, you will get an alert on that. Last but not least, data exfiltration is obviously a big concern because your data is one of the most important assets you have in the cloud. So we constantly monitor the usual amount of data you extract from your CosmosDB collections, and we will send you an alert if we see a deviation from the regular pattern. And to complete the puzzle, there are additional general recommendations to encrypt your data at rest and to enforce firewall rules. Great. So now let's switch to a very quick demo. The demo is quite similar to what Tomer demonstrated, but it's important to highlight the fact that it can be done on CosmosDB, because one of the top questions that we had from customers was, is SQL injection even possible on CosmosDB? And the answer is yes. So the weaponization of SQL injection is limited when compared to other databases, but it's still possible to extract data with a successful SQL injection. And this is what we will see right now. So here we have a user portal for customers of Contoso Medical, and the team at Contoso Medical has a backend that stores and retrieves data from the CosmosDB collection. So in this portal, customers can view the medical prescription they received. And as you can see, my name is John, and I can access the prescription for me and my kids. I can search for a specific prescription. Great, but this search bar is not implemented carefully. And now we will see how John can inject a SQL injection pattern into that search bar. So this is a demo, so I have a magic string here, very handy. And if I hit search, then that's it. As simple as that, you can see that I received all the data and way more data than what I was what I had previously. And let's take a look at the alert that we triggered. So here the IP is obviously less relevant because this is your server's IP, but the two important things are that you can see the SQL statement that generated the alert. You can see how much data was returned, and we also give you the important mitigation and prevention recommendations, which is to use parameterized query in the future. And I want to show you now how it looks in the backend. So let's look at the code really quickly. In the function at the top, you can see that we did not sanitize the parameters, and we did not use parameterized query, and that's not good. And this is why the SQL injection was possible. And to remediate that, the customer can simply use parameterized query, as you can see in the second function. And that's it. I want to finish with some general recommendations, because overall our goal is to not only send alerts, but also to raise your awareness and encourage better security practices when using CosmosDB. So number one, be proactive, follow security best practices, recommendations in the portal, etc. Be very cautious if you use keys, and if you can really switch to RBAC and disable keys altogether. Remember that it's possible to run SQL injection just like we saw, so make sure that you use parameterized queries always when you handle user input. One interesting thing is that if you're not aware of stored XSS attacks, make sure you read about it and think about how you store your data and how it can be used against you or your users, and make sure that your data is sanitized if needed. And lastly, there is always a need for an extra security layer, so obviously we encourage you to enable Defender. And that's it. Thank you, Liana. Back to you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for that, Chaim. That was a really good presentation on the benefits of using Microsoft Defender for Azure Cosmos DB, which is our latest offering. Like you said, it just went to GA last week. So now it's just a time for a super quick summary of what we've covered in this session. So first of all, we talked about why it's important to have a way to protect your data. Then we talked about a quick intro on Defender for Cloud, talked about what capabilities, what SQL assets can be protected using our database plans as part of Defender for Cloud. Then we went into how to enable these. We showed you a demo for it, and Tomer also went into a lot of detail into one of the greatest capabilities that we have, which is advanced threat protection. which basically goes over the alerts that are possible to be triggered once a threat has been detected. And we showed you vulnerability assessment, how to enable it, and also how you can see the misconfigurations. And last but not least, Chaim went over the new Microsoft Defender for Azure Cosmos DB offering. So that's it. We have some useful docs here, and you can actually find all of this information in the aka.ms/security community page. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this call. I really hope that it was helpful to all of you, and thank you very much to our presenters and also all the wonderful moderators who have been answering all the questions. So yeah, if there are any questions that have not been answered that are related to the database plans, then maybe somebody will say them to us.
Yeah, so the one and only question that I don't see the full answer to is, how can we enable the Defender for single instance of Azure SQL database? I can't see that option in the portal. You have to turn on Defender on all the servers in SQL databases.
So, Tomer, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So actually, you need to go to the Defender for Cloud section in your SQL server or SQL database. It's on the left, and for there you have the option of enabling that on the resource as well. So you have the possibility of doing that on the server level. We also provide the PowerShell and REST API and CLI to do that on a resource level.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you. Well, if that is all of the questions, then thank you to Liana, Chaim, and Tomer for being our guests today and for an excellent presentation. And thank you to the rest of the team who helped answer questions. At the same time, I would like to remind the listeners that the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements is to visit our landing page at aka.ms/securitycommunity. And while there, you'll find easy ways to navigate and find the resources and learning content relevant to our security products and their communities. A good start would be browsing our bite-sized product videos, ninja trainings, recordings of past webinars, GitHub communities, and more. We'd love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars. Please take a minute submitting your webinar feedback at aka.ms/securityfeedback. And all of the links that were shared in today's presentation are already available at aka.ms/securitycommunity. Thank you and see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, everyone.